You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Welcome back to the show, folks. Thank you for joining us. I hope everyone is safe and well, social distancing, wearing their masks, and selling some shoes out there. Every so often, we look at the data every week. Things seem to be getting better out there. There's still some uncertainties that are occurring, but the industry as a whole is trying to transform really quickly. Our economy still is in flux, and we'll continue to figure that out. But the most important thing, first and foremost, is safety of our workforce and all the folks out there. So let's just say that first. Matt, how are you doing today? Are you wearing your mask right now?
Hey, Andy, I am in my basement, in my own basement, not my mother's basement, and I am not wearing a mask so that you can hear my voice loud and clear. But I am venturing out here and there more as we get further into the pandemic, and I am wearing my mask. In fact, I have a whole slew of fashionable shoe and other themed masks that are fun to wear. So I am staying safe for sure, my friend.
I'm double masking. I'm mask over mask. I'm kidding. I want to breathe and live in a different way. So, but Matt, one of the key challenges that we see coming down the road is because in situations like this, during a pandemic, during a crisis, is to focus on the here and now, and that's a good thing. Yep. But to look towards the future of where things are headed. So we know from what economists are telling us. We were in what looked like a depression at the very beginning of this. We're coming out of it. It still looks like a longer recovery. And when there's longer recoveries, there's more cheating in the system, I think, if we're honest about what happens. And what that means for the shoe industry is more counterfeits, more knockoffs, more challenges around issues like that, right?
That's right. And you talked about uncertainty in the marketplace. One thing that is certain, Andy, is that counterfeiting is and continues to be a huge global problem. In fact, Customs and Border Protection comes out every year and talks about the billions of dollars in lost revenue for legitimate footwear companies as it relates to counterfeit footwear making its way across our borders. And in particular, in the age of e-commerce and the age of the internet, when you can connect with any illicit seller on Reddit or on Instagram or any other social media platform, Amazon, and purchase said counterfeit footwear, either unbeknownst to yourself or if you're fully aware of it, it's just easier than ever. And so companies need to be equipped. That's why we launched this great website, Footwearfakes.com, which has a whole slew of information. And that's why we partner with companies like Vi3. And I want to welcome into this conversation Paul Foley, who's the Executive Vice President of Strategy at Vi3. Paul, welcome to the Shoe In Show. And right off the bat, talk to us about what the current landscape is for counterfeiting in 2020 from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And hello, Andy. Everything that you said, Matt, in the prelude is really relevant today because the barrier to be a counterfeiter has been really, really lowered to the floor. 20 years ago, if you wanted to be a counterfeiter, you had to go to Asia, you had to source a container of shoes, you had to pay for it, you had to import it, and then you had to sell it. But now with social media, and it's so easy to get connected with others, anyone can be a counterfeiter. Anyone can go up and source product, a few pairs at a time, bring them in to the States, take a couple pairs for themselves, and go onto any platform and try to fence the rest of them. So I think with brick and mortar retail being down and e-commerce sales growing, the barriers of entry for being a counterfeiter have been lowered, and the bad guys don't play by the same rules. So they will take every advantage of the system that's in place to try to bring illicit product into the marketplace.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And Paul, before we kind of explore what Vi3 does from a technology perspective, and when it comes to data intelligence and line of sight into supply chain, which is so critically important right now. Give us your street cred. Like, what's your background as you approach and you develop strategy for footwear companies? Where have you been, and how is that informing where you think footwear companies need to go?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I spent most of my career in the footwear industry. Started off at Reebok for about 15 years, mostly in supply chain. So understanding how shoes are made, spending time, traveling the world, supply chain logistics. Then I worked for a couple software companies in between, and then worked for both Converse and Nike probably the last 15 years. Ended up about the last 15 years helping with the Nike Global Anti-Counterfeiting team. So Nike does a great job of trying to protect that authentic consumer engagement. And that's a little bit about the background of where I've been.
Yeah, so you know your stuff clearly, and you have worked for the brands that have led, for lack of a better phrase, led with their faces as it relates to combating counterfeit. And so you understand kind of the changing dynamics in the marketplace that are impacting companies right now. And so I want to approach this in two ways. One is kind of the technology behind Vi3 and how it works and how it empowers companies to track where their goods are coming and going, maybe throw in a few case studies along the way, and then pivot towards kind of the emerging brands, particularly those that are direct to consumer out of the gate, because it's one thing to be Nike. It's one thing to have global demand for your product at all times, even in down economies, and knowing that you're going to be counterfeited because you're highly successful and you've penetrated every market on the planet. And it's another to be an emerging brand that doesn't have the sophistication, does not have the capital to invest, doesn't have the bureaucracy, in all fairness, to these emerging companies. And so I want to kind of walk our conversation through those channels, if you will. So let's start with the Vi3 experience and exactly how you empower companies to have better line of sight into their product.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. We're a data technology company. So we don't make tags or labels. We partner with any tag or label provider out there that the brands are using. And what we do is we use serialization in the factories starting at the source. So when you cut a purchase order to a factory for 8,000 pairs of shoes, for example, what we do is we make sure that the factories are only making 8,000 pairs of shoes. We're serializing all of the products. So for footwear, it'd be a left shoe and a right shoe and a shoebox. We're using either data matrix, QR codes, NFC technology, or RFID. We're agnostic to the carrier of the serialization. And we work in the supply chain with the label providers and the factories so that the supply chain is coherent from when that handoff happens from the brand to the third-party manufacturer. So if you only order 8,000, we'll ensure that only 8,000 labels are provided so that the factory is not tempted to run extra pairs and have an abundance of overstocks on hand. So we manage that from the very beginning. And then in the factories, what we do is as the products are being made, and let's say, for example, a QR code goes on a tongue label, we're scanning those shoes as they go through the supply chain. So one of the providences that we provide for a brand is usually when you create a purchase order at a factory, say the product has a 60 or 90-day lead time, you're really blind to what's really going on in that factory. So we become your eyes and ears inside the sourcing operations to let you know that, hey, that shoe really is being made today because it's being scanned as they're putting a tongue label on the tongue. And we do it without adding any labor because we're just using a scanner in grocery mode that's sitting right next to the operator that's putting a tongue label on, and he doesn't have any extra steps to add any cost to the process. So we do that throughout the supply chain. So we create a pedigree of products as they're being made, so you know what factory they're made in, what line. All the data is collected, stored in the cloud, and then that is used all along the supply chain to authenticate down the road.
So I think that's really interesting, because we always talk about technology being solutions, but I think the difficulty, Paul, has been for a long time, absent technology, trying to catch these counterfeiters. They're becoming more tricky, as you've said, but trying to compare like for like at this point is amazingly difficult, just eyeballing it because of the quality of the counterfeiters and what they're doing. So it really seems like if you want to make sure and authenticate things, that you have to have this tracking technology. And we just don't have the manpower either just to eyeball things. And I think that's the biggest problem with customs with CBP is they also don't have that. So we need these kind of technologies, correct?
Yeah, you definitely need the technologies. And this is sort of where this sort of grew out of many years ago, is that, the counterfeit quality has improved over time dramatically. You used to be able to pick up a fake item and you could really tell it was fake. It was for a night market somewhere. It was really inferior quality. But over time, the counterfeiters figured out that they can make more money by selling it for full price than a discounted price and calling it a low grade fake. So counterfeiting has really gotten much better as far as quality over several years, and therefore you can't use quality anymore to determine real versus fake, because generally, if you're eyeballing it, most consumers can't tell the difference. There will be substandard materials being used because they'll try to save as much money as they can, but they might look and feel the same. They've never gone through RSL testing. They've never gone through any of the quality testing, but they will probably look and feel the same to the untrained eye. Even to the trained eye, they become very hard to distinguish.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's gotten so sophisticated and really hard to figure that out. But Paul, one of the things I think is also sophisticated is your user interface. And I've seen it demoed before, and I think we are so apt to want to have access, line of sight into all aspects of our life, whether it's our 401k performance or it is where our dog is located when it gets lost, down to where our shoes might be being shipped out the back entrance to the factory. So walk us through of course, this is just audible only, but what is like the visual interface that a user can experience as they're tracking where their goods are currently being made and shipped to?
So starting at the factory, so even if you bring Vi3 in for anti-counterfeiting, there's other benefits that you get out of it, which is supply chain visibility. And supply chain visibility is really the beginning point of anti-counterfeiting, because you need to know what products are yours to distinguish them from what products are the counterfeiters. So if you have accountability to what factory this shoe is made in, at what line, what purchase order, who you're shipping it to from the factory, whether it's going to a distribution center in Europe or Latin America or the States or somewhere else in the world, we give you all that track and trace foundational data that you can also use, especially what we've experienced lately during COVID. When COVID started and brands had to sort of scramble to figure out what is being made. If retail's slowing down, I need to figure out where I am in my supply chain on many products. Do I delay orders? Do I cancel orders? In this uncertainty, a lot of brands were using our system because they knew exactly what they had on manufacturing lines, and they had exactly what they had in finished goods warehouses because of the scanning technology. So that's foundational. And then as we go forward, what products are intended for what market. So as products start appearing in markets they're not intended for, not only do you get the products are real, but it helps your sales channel to say, hey, we have a leak. One of our distributors is transshipping to a hot market, and they're putting product where they shouldn't be. So you can, enforce your rules of commerce that you have with your partners by giving insight and overview into your sales channels. And then from an anti-counterfeiting perspective, we have this a private app that the brands use along with customs and law enforcement all over the world that they're able to authenticate. generally don't recommend that brands have consumers authenticate, because you don't want to put your customers in harm's way. You never know in these day and times, if you're at a retail store in some part of the world and you were able to authenticate it as a consumer, that someone in the store, the owner of the store, might not be too happy with you. So we generally leave it up to the brands and law enforcement to do it. And then everything is geo-positioned with great global map views and detailed drop downs and to go really down to a granular level to navigate the data.
Yeah, and I think that's really a really cool aspect. The user interface is very dynamic and in real time, down to the. I remember talking about this down to a few seconds as to where the last location of that product might be. So if you had shoes destined for the Italian market, and now you're seeing those shoes pop up in Brazil, you have an issue. And these are legitimate products, as you said, and you have an issue with your distribution partners in some regard. And I think that the one thing that you haven't mentioned, but is also an aspect for the potential of the technology, is the ability to maybe not have consumers authenticate by any means, but engage with consumers via the technology to allow them to scan in and learn more about the product, maybe see influencers who are using the product via their mobile device, or there's a whole consumer interface potential that's out there because the amount of data that you can store in these codes for which the Vi3 system can scan and interact with.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. We are becoming a more consumer connected world, and with everyone having smartphones, and pointing your camera at a QR code will connect you directly with that product that has a one-on-one pedigree. And maybe what you want to know is, where was this made? I want to see the brand sustainability story. What are they doing for, wages in that factory? Or what are they doing for wastewater? Or how are they handling the materials? So maybe what I care about as a consumer is, I want to hear a brand sustainability story. Or maybe I want to get marketing information. I'd love to join membership. So by scanning the QR code, hit join, put in my phone number, it becomes that easy to join and become a member of the brand. And one of the other things is, let me get product information. Let me find new releases. So we are moving in a more digitally connected world, and this technology really plays into the future.
I think that's a great point, is data, data points and how we collect those, how we share those, what we do with all that is the future of our industry. And it's, with all the digitization taking place with design and development and our factories, all that data helps us make better decisions. The consumer data we've had for a long time that we're feeding into systems now to make sense of it. And then also this technology where it could actually magnify it even more. So I think all that's really well taken. And I do think, as we look at counterfeits, and as the guys become ever more sophisticated, you have to have technology in order to better protect your brand and see all that line of sight and transparency in supply chains. And Matt, I know, Vi3 is going to be a huge supporter of the footwearfakes.com, the website to keep the industry educated around all things IP. And maybe you can just quickly share some of the highlights of the website that people can go to and learn more about how to better protect their brands overall.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. Vi3 is an important partner as we look for technical solutions around fighting counterfeits. And so the website is a one-stop shop to allow for the industry and the broader community, and in all honesty, the policymakers in Washington to understand the challenges we face as an industry as it relates to counterfeit goods coming across our borders. So there you'll find the special reports that we file with the U.S. government every year, and we testify about counterfeit product to the U.S. government every single year. You'll find proposed legislation that FDRA and the industry as a whole supports to crack down on certain loopholes and provide customs more tools to seize product based on counterfeit and design patent infringement more specifically. And then you'll find a call out to Vi3 and its solution from a technological perspective, so that you have the full range of resources that are available to you as an organization, as an industry, and in partnership with our major brands, Nike, Jordan, Adidas, and many others. And so I would encourage you to footwearfakes.com and check that out. And for more information on Vi3 and its technology, go to vi3global.com. Paul, do I have that URL correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I really appreciate you coming on and educating the broader footwear community on the tool that's available via Vi3, because I think it's so important in an era of data and supply chain management for the industry, not just from a counterfeit perspective, but also there's a lot more policy being pushed as it relates to supply chain visibility and knowing where your product is at all times and where it came from. That this is a really important tool to have our companies be able to access that in real time in a non-invasive way. And so I appreciate, Paul, you coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and thanks, Andy. And we're very proud to partner with FDRA and all the great work that they do.
Awesome. Well, folks, we try to cover all things footwear. Sometimes we talk about how we design shoes, how we make shoes, how we sell shoes. But this episode, especially on how you protect those shoes and how you protect your brand, how you protect your consumer. And I think that really is, sometimes we think about IP so much from a legal standpoint that sometimes we forget about the brand equity standpoint and the consumer standpoint, and the longevity of your brand and the image of it, by fighting counterfeits and making sure that people don't get something that isn't from your brand, from your factory. And I think in the day and age where we're at, when everybody's trying to figure out how to reorganize operations and change business models, it's a prime opportunity to go in and look at your supply chain and look at what you're doing and implement some of this technology to be a huge game changer, as Matt said, for a number of reasons. So we wanted to bring on Paul and talk a little bit about that technology, because really this show is about ideas, it's about trends, but it's a lot about developing critical thought and new solutions that people can actually apply. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode. As always, go to shoeandshow.com. You can see the entire list of episodes. We have over 200 there. We have some great leaders talking about some really interesting things that are still relevant today, even though we're in this pandemic digital age. Some things are still very relevant. So we encourage you to go back. We encourage you to rate the podcast. We encourage you to contact us if you would like to be on the show, or you have ideas of other topics that we need to talk about that are really important to the industry. We're happy to do that as the hub, the business intelligence hub for the footwear industry. And as always, folks, again, as I said at the very beginning, please be safe. Please wear the masks. Keep selling those shoes. And until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.